Chapter 551. Boom! The explosion swept over from Gadatsi's direction, and the resulting hurricane lifted a layer of skin from the surrounding ground. Nay! Achilles' 3 immortal horses were blown by the hurricane and let out a difficult cry. The 3 immortal horses held on for a moment, then dragged the empty chariot and was blown into the sky by the hurricane. Of course, it was not that Achilles and the others were blown away by the wind, but because Achilles and the others got off the chariot before it was blown away. Achilles and Rama lay on the ground, while Sharon held the unconscious blonde girl and hid behind Achilles and Rama. Wuming stood in front of Attila, blocking the hurricane for Attila, and looked at the strange light circle in the sky where the light beam had just been shot. There was no doubt that the explosion and hurricane were caused by the light beam attack. It really is that guy. This is exactly the same as Floro's light beam attack. The guy Wuming was talking about was the Magic King. After all, only that guy could set up a huge light circle in the sky of a singularity and launch such a powerful attack. Floro said that he had obtained the power of the king, and the black light beam shot by the dark light ball gave Wuming the same feeling as the light beam that fell from the sky just now. While Wuming was thinking, in just a few seconds, the hurricane stopped. Wuming shook the dust off his body and looked at Attila. "Are you okay?" Attila, who was not stained by a trace of dust, shook her head in the face of Wuming's concern. "I can do it myself," Attila said coldly. Attila in her servant form was a cold warrior form, which could also be understood as the 3 nothingness. Wuming understood what Attila meant. She was the clone of the giant god Attila, and was not so weak. Even without Wuming, she would not be affected by the hurricane. That being said, I think I did the right thing in protecting my friends. Wuming smiled, then turned away from Attila and walked towards Ka Rong and the others. Attila stared blankly for a moment, as if attracted by Wuming's words. But in an instant, Attila regained her cold and emotionless appearance. However, Attila's gaze remained fixed on Wuming. Wuming walked over to Sharon and helped him up. At the same time, he picked up the golden-haired girl and the Holy Grail. I can only say that he is worthy of being called the Great Sage. Wuming's meaning was simple. Sharon could have given up on the girl and let her be blown away by the hurricane. "You think too highly of me. I'm only here for the Holy Grail." Sharon shook his head with a smile. Although that was what he said, he could have taken the Holy Grail away and only protected it. Instead, he chose to protect the girl as well. No matter what, the result will not change. Wuming then looked at Achilles. "Achilles, can you summon your chariot back?" "Of course not," Achilles said unhappily. Of course, Achilles was not unhappy with Wuming, but with the sudden attack. After that, Achilles whistled, and the chariot pulled by the 3 immortal gods flew over from the horizon. Wuming put the girl and the Holy Grail on the chariot and flew up. "Sharon, Achilles, Rama, I'll go check the situation first. You guys go with Attila." After that, Wuming sped up and flew in the direction of Gadatsi. Then, Achilles and Sharon got on the chariot. "Miss Attila, please come up," Sharon said carefully. Attila did not say anything. She nimbly got on the chariot without any hesitation. However, the owner of the chariot, Achilles, looked at Attila full of fighting spirit. He was very interested in this servant who could make him feel pressure. He glared at Achilles, warning him not to cause trouble, and then looked at Rama. "King Rama, what's wrong with you?" The reason why Sharon asked this was because Rama was in a daze. Rama came back to his senses and looked at Sharon. "Nothing. Just a bad premonition suddenly appeared in my heart. As if something is going to happen to Sito." Then Rama shook his head, no longer thinking about the messy things, and got on the chariot. In this way, Achilles reluctantly pulled the 5 servants and began to move in the direction of Wuming. On Wuming's side, because Wuming used magic to assist his mental power to speed up, and the distance between Wuming and Gadatsi was not far, so in the blink of an eye, Wuming arrived at the original gathering place of Gadatsi and the servants. At this moment, there was nothing left of what was originally a plain. The grass disappeared, the stones were annihilated, the trees were shattered, and there was no trace of it. It could only be judged by the magic of the earth that this used to be a good fertile land. However, the earth's experience was not good. The earth was directly lifted, revealing a barren yellow color. It could be said that there was nothing but barren land here now. But Wu Ming did not want this to be the case. As if God was on Wu Ming's side, in the barren land, Wu Ming saw a different place from the surrounding. The holy round shield appeared in a place similar to a mound, and then, the round shield peeled off the earth, and two figures walked out. Tachika. Matthew. Wu Ming quickly flew over. Is it assassin? Cough cough cough. Tachika was excited. Then she ate a mouthful of dust and coughed. Senpai, are you okay? Matthew helped Gadatsi out of the mound and to the clean flat ground next to it. This made Gadatsi, who had been coughing, feel much better. Cough cough. I'm really choking to death. Gadatsi had an uncomfortable look on his face. After seeing how lively Gadatsi was, Wu Ming was no longer worried, and asked about the other servants. It's good that you're okay. What about the others? When Wu Ming asked, Gadatsi and Matthew both looked sad. Is that so? I understand. Wu Ming nodded. That was an unnecessary question. Under such an attack, the others might have returned to the martyr's palace. It could be said that they were almost wiped out. In the end, if Matthew didn't react and condensed his noble artifact into a point to protect me, I'm afraid I would have. Gadatsi did not continue. So that was the case. Wu Ming pondered. I'm sorry, Senpai Sarand, I really didn't have the confidence to block that attack, so I could only choose to protect Senpai. Matthew lowered his head in guilt. Then Wu Ming put his hand on Matthew's head. Don't worry, I think they're thinking the same thing. Compared to protecting their dead servants, it's more important to make sure that Tachika is safe. What Wu Ming said was right. When the beam of light was about to hit, all the servants used their strongest noble phantoms to delay the beam of light, so that Mashu could use her noble phantoms to protect Gadatsi. It's okay, Matthew, don't blame yourself. Gadatsi hugged Matthew and comforted him. Senpai, it's very dirty. What Mashu meant was that her body was covered with dust, and she looked like a refugee from a slum. It's okay, I like Matthew the most, this is nothing. Gadatsi rubbed her face against Matthew. Senpai. Matthew's face instantly turned red. Although I'm sorry to disturb you, I want to say that the crisis may not be over yet. Wu Ming pointed to the light circle in the sky. Chapter 552. Gadatsi and Matthew both followed Wu Ming's finger and looked at the sky. The strange huge circle was like a circular lamp that was pressed on the huge ceiling in the sky, giving people a very mysterious feeling. Hey, what is that? Gadatsi was obviously shocked. It's never happened before. Matthew also widened his eyes and looked at the huge circle in the sky. Like Gadatsi and Matthew, Wu Ming also stared at the sky. Then Wu Ming said his guess. If I'm not wrong, it's probably the Magic King's noble phantasm. Hey. Gadatsi and Matthew were both shocked. After all, I don't think anyone else can release that level of attack over the singularity except for that guy. Gadatsi and Matthew looked at each other. It seemed that this was the only possibility. I guess, I'm afraid that every singularity has this circle, but the circle was hidden by that guy. It could be said that Wu Ming had not been to the previous singularities, and the only one he had been to was Winterwood City. When he was in Winterwood City, Wu Ming noticed that the sky was slightly different, but he didn't pay much attention to it. When he was in London, because he was underground, he couldn't see the sky, so Wu Ming didn't pay attention to it. At this singularity, Wu Ming noticed the abnormality in the sky. Deliberately hiding it made people notice the abnormality. That guy's move is bad. Wu Ming ridiculed mercilessly. But even so, the other party didn't suffer any losses. The price of exposing this noble phantasm was that almost all the servants were sent back to the Valhalla. Nightingale, Geronimo, Atlanta Edison, Tamamonome, Billy Boy, Robin Hood, Elizabeth, Kyoheim Helena. It could be said that the attack just now had killed those 10 servants. At present, the American continent, which had more than 30 servants in the beginning, was now left with only a dozen servants. Sharon, Achilles, Rama, Attila, and the unconscious Roman girl escaped the attack because they were with Wu Ming. Because of the duel, Arjona and Karna were located in the northwestern part of the American continent. He reckoned that Ison and Demetrius, as well as Hercules, who had Wu Ming filling up the lake, should not have been affected. Maeve and Sito were sent away by Wu Ming using the portal. Gadatsi's personal servant, Matthew Gillett, and Wu Ming, who was currently with Gadatsi. Finally, there was Pamilia, who was sleeping in Riverton. Speaking of this, Wu Ming was quite helpless and angry. According to Gadatsi, Pamilia said that she would take a nap when it was time for her to sleep. Knowing that their team's mission was only to delay the Romans, Pamilia said that she would take a nap first. Then there was no then. The vampire was still in Riverton. At least Wu Ming could be sure that she was not here. But there was no other way. Who would have thought that a simple delay would trigger the appearance of the demon god pillar? If Pamilia was here before, even if Floros got the power of the Magic King, Wu Ming estimated that Pamilia would be able to kill Floros if he used his trump card. After all, even if a child was armed with a machete, he would not be able to fight an unarmed Special Forces soldier. No longer thinking about this matter, Wu Ming began to think about the remaining servants. In addition to Wu Ming himself, there were a total of 14 servants left. Not to mention the strength of the remaining servants. It could be said that if it was an ordinary Holy Grail war, the 14 servants except for Wu Ming could be said to be enough. However, with only 14 servants, in this American continent, where the magic power had been raised to the level of a god, it was not enough. Not to mention, there was a guy like Ison, who was useless and only knew how to drive a boat. It could be said that if the halo in the sky did not hide anymore, except for Wu Ming, the rest of the servants would probably have to leave. Although Matthew could block the attack just now, it did not mean that Matthew could block the rest of the attack. Matthew could block it once, it was already very good. After all, Matthew was still not a mature servant. At present, Matthew was still unable to use Galahad's noble phantasm. Otherwise, there would not be a situation where Matthew could only protect Gadatsi alone. Besides, not everyone would choose to stand on Gadatsi's side. At present, only 7 servants, Wu Ming, Matthew, Sharon, Achilles, Rama, Attila, and Maeve, could serve as the combat power to protect Gadatsi. Pamilia's whereabouts were unknown. Maybe she had woken up, or maybe she was still sleeping. The Roman girl rescued from the demon god pillar had been in a coma, and she could not leave the Holy Grail. She could only rely on the Holy Grail to maintain the integrity of her spiritual base. She could not stay too close to Rama, and even if she woke up with her broken spiritual base, she would not have much combat power. As for Arzu and Karna, Karna wanted to come back to help Gadatsi, but Arzu was unwilling. It could be said that if Karna chose to help Gadatsi, then Arzu would definitely choose to help the Magus King. In this way, he would be able to fulfill his wish and become enemies with Karna again. Karna, who could not get away, could only accompany Arzu as a sacrifice. Hercules probably had not broken free from the bottom of the lake yet. After all, there were so many fake heavenly locks that were no different from the real heavenly locks. Even Hercules would have to spend a little effort to break them. Of course, unless Wu Ming personally helped him break them. Ison and Demetrius. Demetrius would definitely follow Ison. And with Ison's character, Wu Ming didn't expect him to do anything. It could be said that as long as he did not cause trouble, he would be thankful. At this moment, Maeve was not here. Sharon, Achilles, Rama, and Attila were still rushing here. At present, only Wu Ming and Matthew could protect Gadatsi. After thinking for a while, Wu Ming waved to Gadatsi. Gadatsi, come here. Although Gadatsi was puzzled, because of her trust in Wu Ming, she did not hesitate to walk over. Give me your hand. After saying that, Wu Ming stretched out his hand, and held Gadatsi's slender little hand. Hey, what are you doing, assassin? Gadatsi did not care about shaking hands with Wu Ming, but Gadatsi did not understand what Wu Ming wanted to do, and Matthew was the same. Could it be that this was a farewell before death? Just kidding. I'm just giving you my strongest defense. Relax. Then, Wu Ming did not pay attention to Gadatsi and Matthew. Holding Gadatsi's hand, Wu Ming closed his eyes. Then, a beautiful scene appeared in front of Matthew's eyes. The holy and invincible armor on Wu Ming's body, under the effect of Wu Ming's magic, emitted a dazzling brilliance. Then, the armor automatically disintegrated, and then in a series of light, the armor compressed and transformed into a set of armor similar to that of a woman's. Finally, the armor attached to Gadatsi's body, under the shocked expression on Gadatsi's face, forming a slender and beautiful set of white clothes-fitting armor for a young girl. This made Gadatsi, who still had her hand in Wu Ming's hand, stunned. Then, an earth-shattering scream resounded through the sky. Ah! Chapter 553. Wah. Wah. What? What is this? A person who was wrapped in clothes-fitting female armor and wearing an elegant dragon-crowned helmet shouted in excitement and surprise. This person was none other than Gadatsi, who was wearing Wu Ming's armor. Say, Senior, are you okay? Matthew stood beside Gadatsi at a loss and asked cautiously. I'm fine, I'm just shocked to put on assassin's armor. Gadatsi's voice came from the seemingly thin but actually heavy armor. Fortunately, Wu Ming adjusted the armor and added a lot of adjustment tactics. The specific effect was that Gadatsi, a modern girl without the strength to truss a chicken, could wear such a compressed and heavy armor without changing the quality and defense. After that, Wu Ming smiled helplessly as he looked at Gadatsi, who was uncomfortable talking to Matthew because of the helmet. Relax, inject magic, the armor will respond to you. Although Gadatsi was a novice with no experience in magic, after so long, under the guidance of Roman, Olga Marie and Gadatsi, she could still do the ordinary extraction and application of magic. With that said, as if demonstrating, Wu Ming put his hand on Gadatsi, and then the helmet on Gadatsi's head split and attached to her shoulders and back. Hey. So simple. Gadatsi was interested, and she used magic with her small face. In an instant, the helmet that was disassembled and disassembled closed again, and wrapped Gadatsi's small head. Although Wu Ming wanted to complain about Gadatsi's constipated expression just now, then Gadatsi controlled the helmet to disassemble again, and her excited little head was exposed again. It's really amazing, then, Matthew poked Gadatsi. Senior, now is not the time to play. In an instant, Gadatsi's small face became awkward. Right. Right, assassin, you gave me the armor, what will you do? Gadatsi saw before that the cover that trapped the demon god pillar was made of Wu Ming's armor. And Gadatsi also saw that the defense wall was not damaged at all under the powerful attacks of Wu Ming and the demon god pillar. This armor was undoubtedly a super powerful noble artifact. If you don't have this armor, what will you do when the light circle attacks again? Gadatsi said worriedly. Indeed, Wu Ming, the Berserker Holy King Sealan's strongest noble artifact was this set of armor. With an invincible defense and a light spear that could be strengthened, Wu Ming could be said to be invincible. Of course, this invincibility only meant that Wu Ming would not be defeated. It did not mean that he was truly invincible. If Demon God Shutten could use the Holy Grail and the blessing of the Sun God to release the power of the sun, because Wu Ming thought it was troublesome, then facing the demon god Pillar Floros not long ago, Wu Ming really had no way to kill it with the body of a servant. Although it seemed that Floros was no different from the other demon god pillars, Floros said that it had obtained the power of its king. Naturally, it could not be compared to the other demon god pillars. However, it was precisely because of this that Wu Ming borrowed Rama's noble artifact. It's because I'm afraid that the light circle will attack again, so I let you wear this noble artifact. Wu Ming gently touched Gadatsi's little head and messed up her hair. If it's me, I have it. Wu Ming turned his head. Following the direction where Wu Ming turned his head, Gadatsi saw a holy sword that was similar to the Excalibur floating beside Wu Ming. As if responding to Wu Ming's words, the divine blade of salvation shone with holy light and attracted lightning. You should know that the best defense is offense. With the divine blade of salvation, nothing will happen to me. But if you don't have this set of armor, it's very likely that something will happen to you. Wu Ming tried to reason with Gudazi. So be obedient to Chika. In the end, Wu Ming ended with a pampering tone. I know. Gadatsi's cheeks blushed. No matter how good their relationship was, after experiencing such gentle flirting, as a girl who has never been in a relationship before, it was quite fatal. Even Mashu, who was next to him, was blushing like a braised crab. Wu Ming nodded with satisfaction. Sharon and the others will be here soon. You two remember not to run around. Gadatsi and Matthew nodded. Then I'll leave for a moment. With that, a dark purple ripple swallowed Wu Ming, and then the ripple disappeared. Hey, Hey, can you hear me? At this time, Godatzi's wristband sounded. Leader. Is the communication device fixed? Godatzi asked in surprise. However, in response to Godatzi's inquiry, only the voice was heard, and not the image. But the voice was no longer Olga Marie's voice, but Roman's. How could it be fixed? That's magic power comparable to hundreds of holy swords. The explosive magic power directly blew up Chaldea's device. Da Vinci's really tired this time. However, before Roman could finish complaining, Olga Marie's voice was heard again. Get out of my way. After Olga Marie's roar, there was the sound of someone falling to the ground. Then Olga Marie's calm voice was heard. Speaking of which, under the attack just now besides you, who else survived? Yes, Assassin is fine. Achilles, Sharon, and Rama, who were with Assassin, are also fine. The attack just now seemed to be directed at us, or rather, it was directed at Senpai, Mashu explained to Olgamai. Is that so? Godatzi heard Olga Marie's voice and was a little confused. Why did it sound like she was relieved? In fact, Olga Marie wanted to ask for Wuming's comfort, but after all, she was at Sundra, so it was unlikely that she would ask directly. Ahem. In short, Chaldea can only perform simple communication and ray shift for now. It's too dangerous for Tachika and Matthew to continue staying there. Haven't all the enemies been defeated? Let's use ray shift to come back first. This made Godatzi and Matthew shocked. After all, Godatzi and Matthew's mission was to repair the singularity. It could be said that the two completely completed the mission in the past few singularities before returning to Chaldea. But this time, Olga Marie proposed to temporarily return to Chaldea. Haven't all the Holy Grails in this singularity been collected? As long as the Holy Grail is taken away from this singularity, it will repair itself. Then Godatzi smiled awkwardly. That. Director, have you forgotten? All the recovered Holy Grails are temporarily in Assassin's hands. Matthew also added a fatal blow. And the Celtic Holy Grail is not in the hands of the senior Celander. It seems to be in the hands of Queen Maeve. In other words, you've been busy in this singularity for half a day, and you haven't gotten a single Holy Grail. Olga Marie's tone was a little strange. Although I'm sorry, Matthew said. But it's true. Godatzi said. Then, the device on Godatzi's wrist dimmed, which meant that the other party had cut off the communication. Godatzi and Matthew looked at each other and smiled helplessly. Chapter 554. A moment later, Godatzi's bracelet lit up again, but this time, the contact was no longer Olga Marie, but Dr. Roman. Roman said that Director Olga Marie was muttering, "How come we didn't get a single Holy Grail? That guy is an idiot. We could have just given the Holy Grail to Chaldea." He cursed as he left the control room. He seemed to have returned to his own room. Will the director be okay? Godatzi asked worriedly. Don't worry. The director isn't as weak as you think. She's still very strong. Romo's calm and amiable voice was heard. On this point, Roman could be said to have the most right to speak. After all, when Olga Marie became the director, Roman had already been in Chaldea for a long time. It could even be said that Roman was Olga Marie's senior in a sense. For the time being, Godatzi and Matthew began to think about what to do next. Then, Doctor, what should we do next? Matthew asked. This question made Roman silent. At present, the 3 Holy Grails were already in the hands of Wuming, and the Celtic Holy Grail was also in the hands of Maeve. It could be said that as long as Wuming went to see Maeve, brought the Holy Grail back, and gave it to Godatzi, then everything would be solved. So, at present, it seemed that the only thing to do was to wait. In the control room, Roman helplessly scratched his head, and then said to Godatzi on the other side, Well, let's meet up with Sharon first, then think about what to do next. Roman said weakly. Okay, Doctor. Then, Godatzi and Matthew closed the communication, and began to walk in the direction where Sharon and the others left to meet up with them. In the control room, the remaining staff members were working nervously. Only now could Roman breathe a sigh of relief. Roman sat down on the chair behind him and leaned back slightly. Magic Kings. Noble artifact. Heh. The 5th singularity, the American continent, Washington's White House. When Wu-ming sent Sito and Maeve away using the portal, he had set this place as his destination. After all, this was their base camp. It was much safer than other places. However, in the end, Wu-ming still miscalculated. Dark purple ripples appeared, and Wu-ming jumped out of the ripples. Wu-ming stood firmly on the ground, but what welcomed him was an incomparably huge tentacle. Dong! In an instant, the tentacle slammed heavily on the ground, and the ground caved in because of the huge impact of the tentacle. Immediately afterward, the saber light with lightning struck the tentacle, instantly cutting it off. Wu-ming stood beside the severed tentacle and brandished his sword. Without a doubt, the tentacle did not hit Wu-ming. The moment the tentacle fell, Wu-ming dodged it. Wu-ming looked at the owner of the tentacle with a serious expression, a huge pillar of flesh that rose into the sky. Demon God Pillar Flawless. That's right. At this moment, in front of Wu-ming, on the White House Square in Washington, the same demon god pillar as Flawless stood there. Wu-ming had a guess. This demon god pillar Flawless was summoned from the Holy Grail held by Maeve. The evidence was Maeve, who was embedded in the flesh wall of the demon god pillar, with only half of her body exposed. At this moment, Maeve's body was drooping, and she was obviously unconscious. As for Sito, who was already unconscious and brought back by Maeve, Wu-ming, who had already spread out his mental power, indicated that he did not find him. Wu-ming estimated that Sito was either swallowed by the demon god pillar, and was in the body of the demon god pillar, or had been killed by the demon god pillar, and returned to the martyr's palace. At this moment Flawless, who failed the sneak attack, spoke. You can really find this place, Dragon of Origin. It was still Lev's voice, and it was still an unpleasant voice. Demon god pillars are all as disgusting as cockroaches. This is really an eye-opener. Wu-ming mocked mercilessly. Although Wu-ming also knew that to kill the demon god pillar, he had to kill all 72 of them at once, but he could resurrect immediately after dying together. This was a bit of a bug. Of course, an ordinary demon god pillar that appears at a singularity can't do it, but I have the king's blessing. Of course such a thing can be done. As long as there was the Holy Grail and the sacrifice, Flawless could appear on his own. This was the reason why Flawless suddenly appeared in Alexandria, and the reason why he could resurrect in the White House after dying. But I didn't expect you to put the Holy Grail in the hands of this servant. I thought you had already put it away. But this is good. If not, I won't be able to appear again. Ha ha ha. The demon god pillar laughed and shook his body. Maeve, who was embedded in the body of the demon god pillar, also shook along with the demon god pillar. Then Maeve was shaken awake. I am. Maeve, who had just woken up, was still not completely awake. She was a little confused about the current situation. Maeve, are you okay? Wu-ming immediately shouted at Maeve after seeing Maeve wake up. Wu-ming's shout woke Maeve up, but it also made Maeve quite unhappy. Really, little Sai, can't you pretend that you don't care about me? This way this guy can threaten you. Maeve was like a young girl, looking at Wu-ming with a puffed-up face, expressing her dissatisfaction. Maeve and Sito were originally here, but for some reason, Maeve's Holy Grail had an abnormality. It directly used Maeve and Sito's body as a sacrifice to summon the demon god pillar. Because Sito's spiritual base was damaged, she was equivalent to half a servant, so Maeve acted as the other half and was embedded in the demon god pillar. Before her magic was absorbed, Maeve heard the voice of the demon god pillar. That was what Flawless said at that time. Ha! I'm back. Wait for your death, Wu-ming. Then Maeve fainted. Wu-ming told Maeve his real name. So according to Maeve's own judgment, she knew one thing, that was Flawless was Wu-ming's enemy. So Maeve originally wanted to pretend that she didn't know Wu-ming, in case Flawless threatened Wu-ming with her. But you directly called my name. Isn't this telling it that I'm very important to you? Although she was complaining, Maeve was smiling. That was joy. It was impossible for Wu-ming not to know this, but Wu-ming still called Maeve, exposing their relationship and giving Flawless an opportunity. Because Wu-ming was worried about Maeve, it was impossible for him to not recognize Maeve because of threats. Even if I did that, Flawless wouldn't be fooled. After all, Flawless had said before that since Wu-ming came to this singularity, Flawless had been monitoring Wu-ming. Perhaps Flawless already knew about the relationship between Wuming and Maeve, and revealing half of Maeve's body was probably premeditated. That's right. It's because I know about your relationship that I devoured the guy whose spiritual base was about to die and this woman. In this way, I can expose her outside and use it to threaten you, Dragon of Origin Wuming. Facing such a situation, Wuming's hand holding the divine blade of salvation couldn't help but tighten. Trouble. Chapter 555. Wuming, who was being threatened, did not dare to unleash the light cannon attack of the divine blade of salvation on Flawless because it would directly send Maeve and Flawless away. Therefore, Wuming could only suppress the power of the divine blade of salvation and deal with the demon god pillar with just a slash. Swish. A slash mixed with lightning and holy light instantly cut off many of the tentacles that were attacking him. Even the body of the demon god pillar was slashed by the flash of the blade. However, the self-healing ability of the demon god pillar that had obtained greater power was even more powerful. In just a few seconds, the cracked body healed and the tentacles grew out. However, it could be seen that even if the power was deliberately suppressed, the divine blade of salvation was still the divine blade of salvation. The holy sword that could split a star was not just for show. It could be said that the divine blade of salvation could not only be classified as a divine blade of salvation, but also as a divine blade of salvation. Such a powerful divine weapon, even if the power was suppressed, was still not something that the demon god pillar could resist. Originally, it should have been like that. However, because Flawless had obtained the power of their king, his strength had also increased by a level. This created a very awkward situation. Flawless could not hurt Wuming, and Wuming could not do anything to the demon god pillar even if he showed mercy. For example, the original divine blade of salvation that Wuming used had a strength of 100. Currently, the divine blade of salvation that was transformed from the Holy Grail and Rama's divine blade of salvation had a strength of 80. Due to the deliberate suppression, the strength was reduced to 50. The original strength of the demon god pillar, Flawless, was 30. After obtaining the power of the Magic King, the strength became 50. In this way, the two of them were equal. However, the pure data was only used as a general reference. It could not accurately express anything. It only meant that the two of them were unable to defeat each other. As expected, even after obtaining the power of our king, it is still too weak when facing the Dragon of Origin, Flawless said calmly. Indeed, as the King of Flawless had said, there was nothing to be afraid of with an immature Dragon of Origin. Even though Wuming was very powerful in the eyes of many people, he paled in comparison to the Magic King who had obtained the power of the Black Soil. It was true that an adult origin dragon would possess unparalleled power. It could travel through time, move mountains and fill seas, reverse time, and even bring the dead back to life. However, the prerequisite was that Wuming had to stay inside the origin and use its power. That was because the root dragon was a unique creature that was neither human, beast, nor god that was born from the world root that gave birth to all worlds, which was why it had to borrow the power of the root to achieve invincibility. Although it was called the Origin Dragon and had the appearance of a dragon, the Origin Dragon wasn't actually a dragon. The reason Wuming had the characteristics and drawbacks of a dragon was because Wuming's birthplace had shifted from the Great Origin to the origin of the M-shaped moon. To put it simply, he was tainted with an impure bloodline. However, Wuming had already been baptized inside the Great Origin, and had basically eliminated the drawbacks of dragons. It could be said that as long as Wuming continued to be baptized by the Great Origin, he would return to the purest form of the Origin Dragon. After that, as long as he went through the baptism of the Great Origin, an adult Origin Dragon could be said to be truly invincible. For now, as long as Wuming stayed inside the Great Origin, he would be invincible inside. For now, Wuming couldn't interfere with other worlds for the time being. Moreover, as long as Wuming left the Great Origin, Wuming's chances of losing against someone like the Magic King, who could be said to be a cheat, were definitely higher than his chances of winning against him. In other words, Wuming could only rely on his own power as a Dragon of Origin. He couldn't threaten anyone else at all. Whether it was Darius, Romo, Arthas, or even the Magic King, Wuming couldn't defeat any of them. However, Wu Ming himself knew this, which was why Wu Ming had resorted to using external objects. In the past, the queen of the demonic realm, Skaha, who had great wisdom, had also noticed this drawback of Wu Ming's. That was why she had let Wu Ming use the process of sublimation to obtain a noble artifact. The true strength of a servant wasn't their martial arts or anything else, but their noble artifacts, which were killer moves that could instantly turn the situation around. Not only that, but there were also many treasures that had rather miraculous functions, such as resurrecting the dead and reversing time, and so on. All in all, since one's body was weak, one should use powerful weapons. That was how humans had developed. There was no reason why a higher-level species like humans couldn't understand this principle. And that was what Wu Ming did. In the beginning, Wu Ming's sublimation was very difficult, and it required a lot of effort. Now that Wu Ming had the power of origin, it was no longer so strenuous for him. He could easily sublimate items or abilities into a noble artifact. However, Wu Ming would not casually turn a weapon into a noble artifact. After all, even if he really turned a stone into a noble artifact, it would be the lowest grade of grady noble artifact. It wasn't that he couldn't upgrade it, but he didn't know how long it would take. Then, the ordinary stone would become a divine stone. Therefore, if possible, Wu Ming would not simply obtain a noble artifact. In fact, Wu Ming did not deliberately obtain a noble artifact. For example, the Divine Blade of Salvation. That was the artifact that Wu Ming obtained after defeating Rama, who was the last hope, and inheriting the identity of the last king through trickery. Even if the Sword of Salvation in Wu Ming's hand was a weakened version of the Holy Sword, its power was not something that Flawless could block. As it had experienced this personally, Flawless did not completely devour Maeve to threaten Wu Ming. However, Flawless knew that it would lose if it kept defending. Therefore, it was ready to make peace. Forget it, Dragon of Origin. My purpose is just to see Chaldea and the rest. In fact, I don't have the intention to fight you at all. Flawless' tentacles stopped dancing as if they were still in the air. The devil mist and the heat rays in its eyes dissipated. It seemed like it was really ready to make peace. As long as you promise not to interfere with the singularity anymore, I'll let this woman go and allow you to help Chaldea repair the singularity. What do you think? After hearing what Flawless said, Wu Ming slowly lowered the Sword of Salvation. The lightning and holy light on the blade gradually disappeared. Then, Wu Ming let out a long sigh of relief. Sure enough, Flawless, even though we've had a lot of dealings, you still don't know me well. Chapter 556. What do you mean? Flawless was confused. You care about her a lot, don't you? I just need you to stop interfering with the next singularity to save her. Isn't that a good deal? Flawless' voice was like a devil's as he continued to tempt Wu Ming. Ha! Wu Ming lowered his head and laughed. It was a mocking laugh. I won't say much nonsense. Let's put it simply. I can't compromise with you, Flawless. Wasn't that a given? For example, if someone stole something from you and made a deal with you, and it was a deal that wasn't beneficial to you, most people wouldn't agree to it. But, I'm threatening you, Lord Dragon of Origin, Flawless said with a smile. Although he couldn't see the smile on the giant meat pillar, Wu Ming could feel that Flawless was smiling. Moreover, Flawless was right. Wu Ming was being threatened by Flawless at that moment. If he couldn't get rid of this threat, Wu Ming would always be controlled by others. Wu Ming frowned and held the Savior Divine Sword tightly. At that moment, Wu Ming was quite upset. Ah, Xiaosai, you don't have to be threatened by this guy for me. Do what you want to do. Maeve smiled and the command spell hidden under the white silk gloves disappeared. Feeling the magical power invading his body, Wu Ming's heart skipped a beat. Maeve was using the command spell. Fortunately, Wu Ming had the ability to resist the command spell. Traveler. A+, the effect was equivalent to a solo A+, and it could greatly resist the command spell of the master. Wu Ming was able to withstand the power of the command incantation without any pressure. However, that was only the power of the command spell. If it were 2 strokes, it wouldn't be so easy. Xiaosai, use your strongest attack relic on me with all your might. Bang. This was the sound of Wu Ming's other hand suddenly landing on the sword of salvation. Wu Ming held the Savior Divine Sword with both hands and looked up at Maeve. Maeve, don't do anything stupid. Floros also realized that something was wrong. He quickly used his tentacles to wrap Maeve up and prevent her from meeting Wu Ming. However, it was too late for Floros. Finally, love me with all your might, my lover, Surinder. Maeve smiled as she looked at Wu Ming lovingly. The last command incantation was used by Mai Fu. At this moment, Wu Ming and Mai Fu no longer had a master-slave relationship, but a pure relationship between a young girl and her lover. Afterwards, Mai Fu was wrapped up by the tentacles of the demon god pillar and fused into the demon god pillar. Wait a minute. Don't come over. Floros shouted in fear. Excalibur. The third command spell allowed Wu Ming to unleash his strongest attack. Boundless white holy light, mixed with sacred golden lightning, formed a cannon of light that was like a heavenly punishment, covering the White House. Facing Wu Ming's Savior Divine Sword, Floros fell into silence and gave up struggling. It was not only because Floros knew that he could not block it, but also because he was thinking. Even Floros did not expect Maeve to be so determined to let her lover kill him. Perhaps this was the pride of being a hero, and a heroic spirit. Then Floros lost consciousness. After the white light, the White House no longer existed. North of Washington, north of the Appalachian Mountains, there was a huge gully that connected to the Arctic Ocean. Endless seawater poured in, as if it was reflecting someone's anger. The holy light and lightning were still rippling in the seawater. Wu Ming's attack directly cut the continent in half. The energy impact of the Savior Divine Sword was not something that could be blocked by a singularity. After all, the power to split a star was not fake. If it weren't for Wu Ming releasing his own attack and weakening the command spell's effect, perhaps the entire singularity would be shattered in the end. With his eyes closed, Wu Ming took a long breath. Although the servants were the avatars of the heroic spirits, it was still a bit uncomfortable for Wu Ming to kill the lover he had just accepted. Wu Ming had never treated the lives of the servants as lives. This was the same as Gadatsi and Matthew. They would not ignore the life and death of the singularity residents, even if Gadatsi knew that they would be repaired by history. Although this was a lie, it could be seen that Gadatsi and Matthew's hearts were noble. No, it should be said that that was what humans should be. At least, Wu Ming believed that this was what a human was, a real human. Although Wu Ming was not a human, it did not prevent Wu Ming from having the precious character of a human. Maeve. Wu Ming said Maeve's name with a little sadness. From this, it could be seen how deep Maeve's love for Wu Ming was. Without hesitation, she used the command spell to force Wu Ming to kill her along with the demon god pillar. Even if she was just an avatar, who would want to be killed by the person she loved. This courage, this persistence, this dedication, completely explained that even if Maeve was in the ranks of the anti-hero, she also had the pride of a hero. Then let's meet again in the future, Mai Fu. Wu Ming said softly to the original demon god pillar, as if he was whispering to it. Then Wu Ming walked over. As the sacrifice to summon the demon god pillar, the servant had an advantage. That was no matter how powerful the demon god pillar was, how fierce the attack was, the servant as the sacrifice would always be safe. However, after the demon god pillar disappeared, the servant as the sacrifice would withdraw in a short time as if their spiritual base and magic power had been drained. This was the case with G of Justice, and the blonde Roman girl, because of the protection of the Holy Grail, did not directly withdraw. So this time, the servant as the sacrifice of the demon god pillar would be the same. It would definitely withdraw in a very short time. Wu Ming walked to Sito's side. Sito's spiritual base was about to be broken, and at this moment, his body was already faintly discernible. It could be said that at this moment, if not for the protection of the Celtic Holy Grail that fell after Floros withdrew, Sito would have already left. As far as the current situation was concerned, once the Holy Grail left Sito, Sito would immediately disappear. Now the Holy Grail was just hanging on to Sito's last breath. However, fortunately, there was the Holy Grail hanging on to Sito's last breath. In this way, Wu Ming was confident that he could save Sito. Wu Ming suddenly had a guess. Let's give it a try. With that, Wu Ming took out another Greek Holy Grail that he obtained from Ison in his protective shell space, and together with the Celtic Holy Grail, he placed it on Sito's body that was about to dissipate. The light of the Greek Holy Grail appeared, and began to cooperate with the Celtic Holy Grail to nourish Sito's spiritual base. Immediately afterward, Wu Ming stretched out his 2 hands, placed them on the 2 Holy Grails, and began to inject magic power into the Holy Grail. At this moment, the halo in the sky changed, and a beam of light fell, in the direction of, "Where is Tachika and the others?" Chapter 557. In just an instant, the light beam shot by the aperture landed near Alexandria. That direction was definitely the direction of Gadotsi and the others. Wu Ming was willing to bet. However, Wu Ming did not do anything else, and continued to infuse magic into the 2 Holy Grails. Fortunately, Wu Ming was cautious and had already given the invincible armor that was comparable to Avalon's time to Gadotsi. Therefore, Wu Ming was not worried about the safety of Gadotsi and the others. Why was he not worried about the safety of Gadotsi and the others? That was because Wu Ming had already infused a lot of magic into his precious armor in advance. In the face of danger, it would automatically decompose and form a protective shield. Dong! Ignoring the explosion behind him that was even more intense than the light beam shot by the aperture, Wu Ming focused on healing Sito. The miraculous power of the 2 Holy Grails and Wu Ming's almost infinite magic was like a good car with good fuel. The effect of 1 + 1 was far greater than 2. After a while, Sito slowly opened her eyes. You are. Sito looked at the young man who was filled with holy light in front of her in confusion. I'm Rama's friend. I was asked by Rama to come and save you. Wu Ming smiled slightly. Sito was asked by Rama to come. This was not a lie, but it was not true either. It could be considered half true and half false. After all, Wu Ming would not be stingy with his power if he could help this couple improve their relationship. Thank you. Although Sito was still weak, she still chose to believe in Wu Ming. Wu Ming's eyes told Sito that he was not lying to her. Moreover, feeling her spiritual base gradually recovering, Sito also believed that Wu Ming was here to save her. Miss Sito, may I ask what your last memory is? I need to know how long you were unconscious. While her body was being healed by the Holy Grail, Sito recalled for a while, and then answered Wu Ming. I remember that my last memory was talking to that unbelievably beautiful big sister, talking to her about her lover. Sito's face gradually turned red as she talked about her girlish thoughts. The lover that Miss Sito was talking about is Rama, right? Wu Ming said softly. Yes. Sito's voice became softer. He was obviously embarrassed. You two are so loving. I'm so envious. The more Wu Ming spoke, the redder Sito's face became. Wu Ming even suspected that when Sito's face became red to a certain extent, his blood vessels would burst or something. No longer teasing Sito, Wu Ming asked a serious question. Then, who is the lover that the beautiful woman was talking to you about? It was not that Wu Ming suspected Mai Fu. He knew that Mai Fu must be talking about him. Therefore, Wu Ming wanted to know how Mai Fu talked about him and how she loved him. That beautiful big sister Mai Fu, she told me that her lover was a hero that did not lose to Lord Rama. Wu Ming could not help but smile helplessly. This Mai Fu actually called Sito her sister. He saved me when I needed him. After saving the damsel in distress, he did not want to take responsibility. His temperament was volatile, and he could not stay in the same place. However, he was willing to start a war for me. He did not fall for my beauty, but he was able to treat me like family. He was clearly moved, but he still held it in, and in the end, he really left. Sito muttered the words that Mai Fu said when she talked to her. I was so perfect, there were so many men pursuing me, and all of them fell at my feet, but he didn't move at all. I even fell deeply in love with him. It may sound funny, but I still kept my first time for him. Hearing this sentence, Wu Ming was stunned. In his mind, he could not help but think of Mai Fu's sly and slightly blushing face. Although Wu Ming had guessed it, but in front of such a sentence, Wu Ming could not help but be surprised. Wu Ming knew about Queen Mai Fu's promiscuous love before he came to this world. Wu Ming guessed that Mai Fu in this world should also be like that. However, because Wu Ming met my Fu when she just came out of her ivory tower, and until my Fu died after Wu Ming left, Wu Ming did not see my Fu having intimate contact with any man except himself. In other words, my Fu was indeed a pure girl. Nature would be suppressed by a stronger desire, and Wu Ming was my Fu's stronger desire. Not noticing Wu Ming's abnormality, Sito continued. However, I'm really happy that he was able to accompany me for such a long time. Even if he left and I was attacked by death, I still love him. I hope that he can accept me and not leave me to travel alone. From the looks of it, my years of strategy have finally paid off. Sito's cheeks blushed. It seemed that imitating my Fu's tone was a great test for her. After hearing this sentence, Wu Ming smiled helplessly and satisfactorily. Wu Ming suspected that my Fu deliberately let Sito say these words to him. However, my Fu did not lie, and this was what Wu Ming was satisfied with. Although Wu Ming did not stop the movement of transferring magic power, he did not speak and quietly waited for Sito to continue. However, Sito did not continue and changed the topic. That. Lord Saran, the person sister my Fu was talking about is you, right? Wu Ming didn't say his name, so for Sito to know, it was most likely Maeve who told Sito Wu Ming's name. She also told Sito about her lover, Wu Ming, in this singularity, and even his appearance. Wu Ming smiled helplessly and then asked Sito, "Since you know that I'm Saran, you must also know that my Fu and I are the leaders of the forces that captured you. Don't you hate us? After all, everyone makes mistakes, and now it was you and Sister my Fu who saved me from being used as a sacrifice by the Greek forces. Although Sito was still used as a sacrifice by Floros. Well, take this as my apology to you." Wu Ming nodded and did not persist on this point. "That, Lord Saran, Sister my Fu also asked me to tell you something." Wu Ming looked at Sito in confusion. Then Sito spoke. "Sister my Fu said that she will wait for you at the Martyr's Palace, no matter how long it takes." After that, Wu Ming was stunned. Then Wu Ming nodded. "I've received the message. Thank you, Miss Sito." That, you don't have to use honorifics, just call me Sito. After all, Lord Saran and Lord Rama are good friends. Wu Ming nodded. "Speaking of which, you and Rama are really in love. No wonder he asked me to save you." Then Sito went silent for a few seconds. "There's no such thing, I'm sorry, Lord Rama." Sito's voice was extremely soft. If it were not for Wu Ming's good hearing, he might not have heard Sito's words. "Actually, Rama is the same as you." Huh. Sito widened her eyes. "One night, Rama was worried about you and had a heart-to-heart talk with me. He told me that he was sorry. Of course, it was a lie. Rama did not have a heart-to-heart talk with Wu Ming. But Wu Ming, who understood Rama's heart, could naturally infer Rama's love for Sito. In order to let Sito prove his innocence, Rama forced Sito to commit suicide, which made Rama feel guilty. It was also because of this that Rama appeared in the form of a young king. According to Rama's words, it was, "Only at this time, I was the Rama who would do anything for Sito. I was the husband that Sito needed. The Rama who loved her deeply." He repeated the words of Rama to Siddhartha. As a result, Siddhartha, whose face was originally flushed red, began to shed tears. "Lord Rama," Sito murmured softly. Then Sito looked at Wu Ming. "Lord Sarandar, please agree to my request. Help me pass on a message to Lord Rama." However, before Sito could finish, Wu Ming interrupted him. "No need. So if you want to say it, you can say it yourself. Now you and Rama can meet." Hey. Chapter 558. Wu Ming's words stunned Sito. Then, Wu Ming did not explain too much to the shocked Sito. "You should go and experience it for yourself." After that, Wu Ming brought Sito, whose spirit base had been repaired, to Alexandria through the teleportation door and found Rama. Then Rama and Sito were surprised. After all, as long as the two of them were too close, one of them would gradually weaken until one of them disappeared. In the end, the two of them who gradually got closer found that the two of them did not show any signs of fainting, or even disappearing. "Sito. My Sito. Lord Rama." Rama and Sito hugged each other. Everyone consciously did not disturb the couple who could never meet each other. Instead, they made space for Rama and Sito. Wu Ming and the others walked to the side. Facing the doubts of everyone about the attack that could split half the continent, Wu Ming explained what happened just now. Is that so? I didn't expect the queen to sacrifice herself. Matthew said sadly. For our little eggplant, sacrificing anyone was worth feeling sad. No, it should be said that Matthew would feel sad involuntarily. However, I didn't expect you to break the curse. Godatsi's wrist made a sound. Director, is it fixed again? It's so fast this time. Godatsi made a sound of surprise. The voice from the terminal on Godatsi's wrist was naturally Olga Marie's voice. Then, Olga Marie's virtual projection appeared. Although he did not know the truth, Wu Ming could more or less guess. The light beam attack just now once again cut off the connection with Chaldea. Now it seemed that Da Vinci, who was in charge of repairing it, had become more familiar with it. Or it could be said that the communication device gradually became more advanced, and only needed a simple repair. Let's not talk about this first. I also heard my servant just now. Then is it possible that such a situation will happen again? Olga Marie was referring to the nature demon god pillar that automatically appeared with the help of the Holy Grail and the servant. If such a Holy Grail was taken to Chaldea, it was better to be safe than sorry. If a demon god pillar appeared, the fragile Chaldea would be destroyed directly. After all, Chaldea's instruments were just some things that were not very sturdy for servant-level people. If the demon god pillar appeared, they would be done for. You don't have to worry about that. The Celtic Holy Grail and the Greek Holy Grail have already been purified by me with a large amount of mana. There's no possibility of summoning the demon god pillar anymore. As for the Roman Holy Grail, I can do the same to eliminate the threat. As for the Japanese Holy Grail, as for the Holy Grail, as for the Holy Grail. What's wrong, assassin? Godatsi looked at Silent in confusion. The Holy Grail of the Japanese forces has been made into my noble phantasm. Wu Ming scratched his head awkwardly and extended the sword of salvation in front of everyone. Huh? Not only Olga Marie, Godatsi, and Matthew, but even Achilles and Sharon were stunned. Turning the Holy Grail that the servants fought for into his own weapon, it was estimated that only Wu Ming could do such a thing. Of course, I will not take it away. I will give it to you. Huh? This time, everyone was collectively stunned. The servants' noble phantoms were condensed by magic power. It could be said that after the servant left, the noble phantoms could not be preserved. But listening to Wu Ming's words, it did not seem like he wanted to keep it. This is a noble phantoms made with the Holy Grail as the raw material. Naturally, it can be preserved. Wu Ming explained very considerately. Indeed, if it is a noble phantoms made with the Holy Grail as the raw material, it is possible to leave the servant's body. As a scholar, Sharon strictly explained to everyone. He was even more certain that Wu Ming's words were correct. By the way, the attack just now did not cause any harm to you, right? Wu Ming looked at Godatsi. We are completely fine. Godatsi, who was wearing her armor, excitedly hugged Wu Ming's arm and shook it. Looking at Godatsi's cheerful personality, as a teacher, Sharon also smiled. Because of your noble phantoms, the enemy's attack was completely blocked. Not only us, but even the surrounding land was unharmed. I can only say that it is great that this land was not ravaged again. Roman, who was in the corner of Olga Marie's projection, said weakly. I have to say, even if I have an immortal body, I can't block it. Achilles carried his gun with both hands and looked unhappy. That's why I taught you not to be too arrogant, Achilles. Sharon once again became a teacher. Yes, I understand. Looking at everyone chatting, Matthew felt very warm, but Matthew noticed that Wu Ming was thinking about something. That, Senpai Cylinder, are you thinking about something? When Matthew said this, Godatsi and the others also looked at Wu Ming. Wu Ming looked at everyone, then said what he was thinking. Well, for the attack just now, I don't think it was released by Floros before he died. Wu Ming's words made everyone feel a sense of crisis. Do you mean that it was released by the Magic King himself? Olga Marie said with some uncertainty. Looking at the slightly embarrassed Roman, Wu Ming said, After all, that's the Magic King's noble phantasm. It's not strange for the Magic King to use it himself. However, because the intensity of the light beam was similar to the one released by Floros, everyone thought that it was released by Floros before he died. But as the one who killed Floros, Wu-Ming knew that the light beam was released after Floros left the stage. In short, I will go look for him later, Wu-Ming said calmly. Then the scene fell into silence. Only Sharon and Achilles, one of them looked helpless, and the other crossed his arms in front of his chest. There was also Attila, who had been standing beside Wu-Ming without any unnecessary actions or words since he came back. Ah! Other than Achilles and Sharon, everyone else cried out in shock. Wait a minute, Cylinder. Are you going to look for the Magic King directly? Roman's face instantly appeared on the virtual projection screen. Go away. Olga Marie pushed Roman away. You're not really going to look for the Magic King directly, are you? Olga Marie looked worried. Directly looking for the Magic King or something, as expected, is still a little rushed. Gadotsi smiled with a helpless expression. Senior Cylinder, that's too dangerous. Matthew looked at Wu-Ming with a serious face. Looking at everyone trying to persuade him, Wu-Ming was helpless. Don't think that I'm too weak. After all, I'm someone with a special identity. After Wu-Ming said that, Gadotsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie remembered that Wu-Ming had fought the Magic King in the underground of the Fourth Singularity. Who exactly was he? In an instant, this question filled the minds of Gadotsi, Matthew, and Olga Marie. Chapter 559. As for my identity, I will slowly tell you in the future. Of course, if someone who knows my identity wants to tell you, I won't stop them. After that, Wu-Ming secretly looked at Roman. This made Roman sweat profusely. In short, Tachika and Matthew should hurry back to Chaldea to rest. After all, the sixth singularity isn't something these singularities can compare to. Wu-Ming smiled and kept them in suspense. After fiercely staring at Wu-Ming, Olga Marie nodded. So Tachika, Matthew, get ready for ray shift. Let's get to work, Roman. Roman, who was reprimanded by Olga Marie, quickly left and prepared for ray shift. Gadotsi nodded, indicating that she was ready, but as if she thought of something, Gadotsi looked at Olga Marie. Director, Fufu and Miss Pamilia are still in Riverton. We have to go back to pick them up. Matthew also nodded. He was worried about Fufu, but every time Fufu was in danger, no one knew where to hide. In the end, it was always able to follow Gadotsi and Matthew back to Chaldea. You don't have to worry about this. As a servant, as long as the world starts to repair, Pamilia will be automatically ejected and forced to transfer ray shift. But that creature called Fufu. Wu-Ming touched his chin and entered into a state of thinking. I'm not sure if it can be ejected. Let me go to Riverton. Wu-Ming directly made the decision. Speaking of which, I'm quite interested in Fo, who Mashu has been talking about but I haven't seen. After saying that, Wu-Ming opened the portal and walked in. I'll be right back. A moment later, a vampire girl who was still sleeping soundly and a creature that looked like a cat, a dog, a squirrel, and a squirrel were brought over by Wu-Ming. Fufu. The little creature named Fufu kept struggling in Wu-Ming's hands, as if Wu-Ming was a demon. Wu-Ming loosened his grip on Fufu, and Fufu immediately ran and jumped onto Matthew's shoulder, hiding in Matthew's short hair and shivering. Fufu, are you okay? Matthew stroked Fufu's body with concern. This little guy wanted to run when it saw me. Fortunately, I was fast and caught it off guard. Otherwise, it really would have escaped. Wu-Ming looked at Fufu with a playful look, which made Fufu hide even more in Matthew's hair. It can be said that the only time Wu-Ming met Fufu was at the Winterwood City Singularity, when Gadotsi and Matthew were about to leave. At that time, Fufu suddenly ran out of nowhere, then quickly jumped onto Matthew and hid behind Matthew's short hair. At that time, Wu-Ming had already found that this creature was hiding from him, so he was quite interested in it. However, Wu-Ming always felt that it was familiar, but he couldn't remember it. But because Gadotsi and Matthew were about to be transferred by Lingzi at that time, Wu-Ming also suppressed his interest. Now Wu-Ming finally knew. Wasn't Fufu the cat demon named Cassipalug that he once killed in Britain? It seemed that the cat demon was not completely killed, but in the end, it seemed to have been adopted by Merlin. Fufu, don't be afraid, Senpai Cylinder is not a bad person, Matthew comforted while stroking Fufu hiding behind his neck with one hand. However, Fufu was still scared to death and refused to come out from behind Matthew's neck. However, Wu-Ming was not surprised. After all, Fufu was facing someone who almost killed him. Of course, Fufu would be scared. Not only that, Wu-Ming, who had the origin force, could also see the nature of Fufu, just like how Wu-Ming could see the nature of Roman at a glance. Fufu was one of the fourth beast 4, that held the principle of comparison. Strictly speaking, if Fufu grew up, it would be a creature on the level of Tiamat. Although Wu-Ming did not think that the cat demon that he had defeated before was comparable to Tiamat, Wu-Ming did not think that the cat demon that he had defeated before was comparable to Tiamat. Now Fufu in Wu-Ming's eyes was like Wu-Ming in the eyes of the Magic King who had obtained the origin force. They were both immature existences. Wu-Ming now understood why he could not see Fufu. It was because Fufu had been trying to avoid him. Not only because Wu-Ming was once an enemy, but also because Fufu, or one of the fourth beast, loved and protected humans. Wu-Ming, who loved and protected humans, was a natural enemy. Fufu, who had grown up a little, could not defeat Wu-Ming. Now Fufu, who had not grown at all, was not Wu-Ming's opponent. It did not mean that an ordinary servant could kill it. After all, no matter how useless a dragon was, it was still a dragon. Ordinary people could not tease a dragon like the saying, "A dragon in the shallows will be teased by a shrimp." However, the reason why Fufu became like this was all thanks to Matthew. The fourth beast would absorb the evil characteristics around it and evolve into a beast. As long as the fourth beast stayed in human society, it would absorb the negative substances of human society and evolve into a terrifying beast. Fufu, who was only with Matthew all year round, was completely unable to absorb the evil information of the outside world. The result was obvious. Matthew did not have the evil of human beings that Fufu needed, but the good of human beings. Therefore, Fufu was still in the most ordinary form. However, this was also good. If it went on like this, the fourth beast would be defeated sooner or later, and it would be effortless. Sure enough, Matthew is a good boy. Wu-Ming smiled gently. But this made Matthew a little overwhelmed. Wu-Ming did not explain, and just shook his head. Well, let's leave quickly. I still have to find that guy. Godatsi and Matthew looked at the surviving servants. I am waiting for your summon to Chica. I will teach you a good lesson as your teacher, Sharon said with a smile. No problem, teacher. Godatsi saluted playfully. Yes, summon me too. Although I am not as good as this guy, I am still very strong. Achilles looked at Wu-Ming, his eyes burning with fighting spirit. This made Wu-Ming smile a little helplessly. If possible, can you let me and Sito go with you? At this time, Rama and Sito came over. Chapter 560. Go together? Godatsi was puzzled. Yes. Romo nodded and then looked at Wu-Ming. Thanks to my friend, I can now reunite with Sito. I'm really grateful to you, my friend. Romo looked at Wu-Ming gratefully. Thank you, Master Cylinder. Sito did the same. He looked at Wu-Ming with a grateful expression. But it seems that it's because of the effect of the Holy Grail that I and Sito can be together. The Holy Grail doesn't belong to me and Sito. And if I and Sito are separated again, I'm afraid we won't have the chance to get along like this. So I and Sito are considering whether we can go together. It was not easy for a couple to be summoned together. Not to mention that both of them still had the curse on them even after they became heroic spirits. After all, this was the curse that had troubled Romo and Sito for a long time. Only a miracle like the Holy Grail could make this curse disappear temporarily. In this way, Godatsi, who accepted Romo and Sito's proposal, could not only bring the Holy Grail back to Chaldea, but also let Sito and Romo continue to reunite, and also increase the strength of Chaldea's servants. Killing 3 birds with 1 stone, why wouldn't he do it? Godatsi and Matthew looked at each other, and then looked at Olga Marie. Well, if we use a special method to mark Romo and Sito, and then use the method of summoning servants, It's not impossible to summon the two of you from this singularity. Olga Marie pondered as she began to mark the spirit bases of Rama and Sito. You two stand over here. Then, while Romo and Sito were accepting the spiritual base mark, Gadotsi and Matthew looked at Wuming again. I'm the one who prepared the Holy Grail for you. You can do whatever you want with it. Wuming said with a smile. Besides, Olga has begun to mark Rama and Sito's spiritual base. She is going to send them to Chaldea. Why are you still asking me? Wuming joked. Hearing Wuming's words, Gadotsi and Matthew both laughed. After all, Assassin helped us get the Holy Grail, so we have to ask. You little guy. Wuming smiled helplessly and touched Gadotsi and Matthew's little head, messing up their hair. Why am I touched? Matthew said weakly. At this time, Olga Marie suddenly spoke. It's done. As expected, marking a servant's spiritual base is nothing to me. Olga Marie proudly said, raising her neck like a white swan. Yes, Olga is the best. Wuming smiled as if he was praising a child. Although it was not easy to mark a servant with the Holy Grail in their body, it was not difficult. It could be said that if it was Roman, he could also do something like marking a servant who took the initiative to accept the mark. All in all, as long as Tachika comes back, immediately summon Romo and Sito. Then they can be brought to Chaldea. Then Gadotsi looked at Romo and Sito. Then welcome in advance Mr. Romo, Ms. Sito. Romo and Sito also looked at each other and smiled. Thank you, Master. Thank you, Master. At this time, Wuming quietly came to the side of Olga Marie's projection and asked, Is there any problem? Let the servants go to Chaldea. Of course there is no problem. Chaldea has a lot of servants who accepted Tachika's summon. Olga Marie said that there was no problem at all. This made Wuming stunned. When he went to Chaldea, he didn't see any other servants. As if she saw Wuming's thoughts, Olga Marie smiled helplessly. I heard from Romani that you only stayed in the control room for a short while. Did you go out and see? Chaldea prepared a lot of servants' rooms, and there were a lot of servants living there. Wuming smiled awkwardly. Indeed, although he went to Chaldea, he only stayed for a short time, and he only stayed in the control room for a short while. At this time, Roman's voice came. Reiki transfer is ready, Tachika. Matthew, get ready. Everyone immediately made way for several people who were preparing for Reiki transfer. And this. Wuming picked up the Holy Grail that was still on the unconscious Roman blonde girl next to him. Anyway, it would disappear later, so it didn't matter. With a gentle toss, Wuming threw the Roman Holy Grail into Gadotsi's hand. Then a lot of magic appeared around Gadotsi, Matthew, and Pamilia, who was still sleeping. That was the precursor of Reiki transfer. Then, Wuming threw the Sword of Salvation in his hand, and the Sword of Salvation was directly attached to the ordinary knight sword on Matthew's waist. The armor may disappear after returning to Chaldea, but this Holy Grail made of Holy Grail will not disappear. You can use it, or use it as a relic to summon me. In short, you can use it as much as you want. Gadotsi touched the armor on her body. Matthew touched the sword on his waist, and nodded at Wuming. Then Gadotsi and others turned into light and disappeared. As soon as Gadotsi and others left, Achilles and Karen's body began to glow. I'm running out of magic. Sharon touched the back of his head in embarrassment. I'll take my leave first. With that, Sharon turned into magic and disappeared. Looks like I'll have to disappear early, just like my teacher. Then, whether it's Sodric or Celander, let's have a good fight next time. No problem, let's have a good fight next time, Achilles. Wuming smiled at Achilles. Then Achilles disappeared as well. Then the unconscious Roman blonde girl who had lost the protection of the Holy Grail also turned into light and disappeared after Achilles disappeared. At the same time, rays of magic light rose from other parts of the continent, which was a sign that the followers had left. Perhaps, only Attila and Wuming were left in this singularity. At this moment, the entire singularity began to shake violently. This was the sign that the singularity that had lost the Holy Grail was beginning to be repaired by the power of historical correction. Why, don't you want to say goodbye, my friend? Wuming smiled at Attila. There's no need. Attila said coldly. But the silence at the beginning meant that Attila's heart was not cold. That's true. It won't be long before I release you. This is the promise I made to you as your first friend. Attila looked at Wu Ming and did not speak. Wu Ming did not speak to Attila again. The two quietly watched the singularity begin to be repaired, and waited for their departure. Then Attila's body began to glow. Then I'll wait. Wu Ming looked around, but there was no one around. Wu Ming stretched. Then, it's time to find the fake magic king. Chapter 561. In the source of chaos, traces of light came from the center of the chaos. It was strange. It was chaos, but there was a center, which gave off a rather contradictory feeling. In the center of the light, a giant dragon was sleeping on the platform formed in the center. The light was emitted from the giant dragon's body. Beside the giant dragon, there was a smaller dragon with 4 pairs of horns on its head. Interestingly, apart from the size and number of horns, the smaller dragon was exactly the same as the giant dragon. The little dragon was casually walking around the giant dragon, but it never left the giant dragon's surroundings. It just kept walking like this. Upon closer inspection, one would discover that the eyes of the smaller dragon did not have any consciousness. Although it was walking freely, it gave off the feeling of a puppet. After an unknown period of time, the smaller dragon was still walking around, but the giant dragon woke up from its deep sleep. Wu Ming slowly opened his eyes, and an unknown aura spread in all directions as Wu Ming opened his eyes. It was the coercion that belonged to the origin dragon. If there were fantasy breeds around at this moment, they would be immediately suppressed by Wu Ming's coercion. After sensing the natural release of power, Wu Ming shook his head slightly. I lost my dragon's coercion, but I gained a higher level of coercion. Wu Ming slowly propped up his body and opened his huge dragon mouth. Roar! A roar that was different from a dragon's but louder than a dragon's echoed throughout the entire source. Then, as though a bright lamp had been placed in the chaos, the entire source was instantly covered by the light emitted from Wu Ming's body. Master, are you awake? At that moment, a voice came from the top of the smaller dragon's head. At that moment, the smaller dragon's body was no longer moving. Instead, it stopped steadily beside Wu Ming like a standby machine. Collis, it's been hard on you. Wu Ming supported his upper body and stretched. His huge dragon head looked at the small dragon that looked exactly the same as him. To be precise, he was looking at the top of the smaller dragon's head. There's no such thing, Master. Although a lot of time may have passed on your side, only a short while has passed on Collis's side. While speaking, the smaller dragon's pair of dragon horns suddenly detached from its head. Then the dragon horns grew larger and merged with Wu Ming's head, turning him into a giant dragon with 4 horns. Oh, could it be that you've used my body to adjust the time of the root of everything? The crimson eyes were filled with surprise. Wu Ming had no choice but to create this small dragon because Wu Ming's main body had to guard this place to prevent a sneak attack. If Wu Ming wanted to go out, he had to use this backup body. However, this backup body was created by Wu Ming using his own flesh and blood, as well as other materials, as well as origin energy. In that case, it was not strange that this body had Wu Ming's main body's abilities. However, Wu Ming had never done much research on this body, so it was only used as a backup body when Wu Ming went out. But now, it seemed that this backup body's abilities had been developed by Collis. She could actually adjust the time difference between the outside world and the source. Master, please punish me, Collis said in a low voice. Wu Ming naturally knew what Collis was referring to. She had developed his backup body without his permission. Like a paranoid person, he would definitely suspect that Collis was trying to replace Wu Ming. After all, apart from combat strength and adaptability to time and space, Wu Ming's backup body was no different from Wu Ming's main body. In other words, it was not impossible for Collis to use Wu Ming's backup body to betray Wu Ming. However, Wu Ming did not think so. Putting aside the fact that Collis was destined to be unable to rebel against him, Wu Ming believed that Collis would not betray him. Time had proven that the bond between Wu Ming and Collis was unbreakable. Although Collis was a magic costume, Wu Ming did not treat her as a magic costume. Instead, he treated her as a friend, partner, or subordinate. In short, she was someone he could trust. Why would I punish you, Kalas? I can't thank you enough. Wu Ming shook his head. Xiao En is stubborn. If I don't take the initiative to talk to her, she will treat herself as a weapon. As for you, you often take the initiative to talk to me. You even protect me when I use my servant's body to go out. Why would I punish someone like you? Wu Ming extended his dragon claw and touched Kalas. You're too kind, master. This is what I should do. Dragonhorn said softly. However, he felt that Kalas was enjoying it. After hearing Wu Ming's words, the chain seemed to be dissatisfied with Wu Ming's words. It resisted slightly and gently knocked on Wu Ming's body. However, to Wu Ming it was simply acting coquettishly. After comforting Enkidu, Wu Ming continued. Besides, you helped me develop this body's ability. I can't be happier. Why would I punish you? If this body could be like Wu Ming, then it could replace Wu Ming to guard the house, and Wu Ming's body could go out. Who doesn't want to use their original body? Who wants to use a fake body every day? Then the next time I go out with my original body, Kalas will come with me. Wu Ming suddenly said. Thank you, master. Although Kalas was a magic costume, she also had her own thoughts. She could see that Wu Ming wanted to make up for the loneliness in her heart. After all, you are not my slave. Don't talk about letting you stay here every day. If it were me, I would be bored to death. Wu Ming's dragon face showed a helpless expression. Wu Ming believed that Kalas was too lonely. That was why she worked so hard to develop this body, which diverged the time between the origin and the outside world. This way, she would be able to see Wu Ming soon and wouldn't have to wait for a long time. Although Wu Ming didn't think it would be a long time. After all, Wu Ming only spent a few days or so to go out of the singularity with the body of a servant. However, for Kalas, even if she didn't see Wu Ming for a day, she would still be lonely. She was a sentient tool that was determined to have a master when she was just born. After she gained the master's favor and decided to serve the master forever, she realized that the master would leave her side every few days. Even if she had a lot of knowledge and experience, after losing the master that she could rely on, Kalas, who was actually less than a year old, couldn't accept it, even if it was just for a short period of time. With that thought in mind, Kalas successfully controlled Wu Ming's spare body and developed the ability to control the internal of the origin. Simply put, it turned from an ordinary robot in the lab into a central controller. Then let me test the performance of this body. Saying so, Wu Ming put his claws on the spare body that was smaller than his original body. In an instant, the spare body's eyes emitted a bright light, making people feel as if they had been turned on. Chapter 562. Two dragons, one large and one small, stood on the platform inside the origin. The small dragon was moving about while the large dragon stood silently on the platform. Wu Ming's consciousness was still in his main body. The small dragon could move about because it was under Wu Ming's control. After all, the small dragon could be considered as Wu Ming's clone. With his spirit power rapidly developing, Wu Ming could already separate a sliver of consciousness from his main body and enter this body. Roar! The small dragon let out a furious roar. In an instant, the primal chaos around him rippled, and several transparent spheres appeared. On each ball, there were constantly changing images. These spheres represented every world that Wu Ming had been to. The small dragon pointed with its finger. One of the spheres floated over and arrived before the large dragon. Upon closer inspection, the image on the sphere was of some elementary school students in class. Has Mayu already started school? She should be in the 6th grade now. Has it been so long? Wu Ming sighed. I clearly said that I would return soon. I can only say that I didn't expect the enemy to be so difficult to deal with. Wu Ming looked at Mayu, who was listening attentively in class with nostalgia. Ripples appeared in his eyes as if he was reminiscing about his past experiences with Mayu. Coming back to his senses, Wu Ming looked to the side. He saw the sleeping Ilya and Chloe, who was trying to tease Ilya. These two little fellows. Wu Ming shook his head with a smile. Fortunately, I have the means to control the passage of time. I was afraid that Mayu would have become adults by the time I returned. As Wuming spoke, the small dragon pointed with its finger again. The sphere that represented Mayu's world fluctuated slightly. This way, the passage of time in Mayu's world will be extremely slow compared to other worlds. This way, Wuming would be able to return before Mayu's 6th grade winter break and fulfill his promise with Mayu. Then Wuming controlled the small giant dragon to bring the balls of the other worlds that Wuming had been to before to Wuming. Wuming looked at the world of the god slayers, paying attention to the daily lives of his god of disobedience's minions and his beautiful female knights, and then felt a little helpless. As expected, the gods of disobedience are indeed the gods of disobedience. They seem to have settled down, but they still caused a lot of trouble, and Wuming switched to an image on the ball. The person on it was Wuming's authoritative spirit bead, Neza. Basically, it's this guy who leads them, Wuming said with a gloomy expression. In the world of the god slayer Neza, who was about to go to Italy to steal the sword of the King of Swords, Salvatore Toni, suddenly felt a chill on his back. After looking around cautiously, Neza decided not to go in. Wuming smiled helplessly, shook his head, and then looked at the other worlds. In the big underground tomb of Nazalik, Demiurgos and Yerbade were discussing something. It seemed that they had listened to Wuming's words, and did not go out for the time being. They were trying to hide in the big tomb as much as possible. Although I don't care much about good or evil, I still can't help but worry about these guys with -500 justice points. Wuming said helplessly. Let's just pause the time of this world. After all, it could be shut down later. There was no difference. With that thought in mind, Wuming controlled the small giant dragon to tap lightly on the ball that represented this world. In just an instant, the ball seemed to be frozen with a layer of ice. The people in the ball, or rather the world, were completely frozen. It was not an ordinary freeze, but a freeze that interfered with time and space. Therefore, the people in that world did not notice it. Let's just do the same to the other worlds. Wuming smiled irresponsibly. Although it was indeed very convenient, it was almost useless in the world where the Magic King was. The reason Wuming could affect Mayu's world was because Wuming had protected that world before he left. Now, the world where the fake Magic King was in was no longer under Wuming's control. The fake Magic King, who had grasped part of the power of Source, was not to be trifled with. If not for the fact that the fake Magic King could not reach the major source, he would have probably replaced Wuming long ago. At that time, the fake Magic King could really be said to be invincible. But now, although I can't say I'm invincible, I'm not afraid of you. Wuming's dragon face showed a smile. Immediately after, Wuming adjusted the flow of time in the world of the Skywings. Of course, when he said, let's just do the same to the other worlds, it was a joke. Then Wuming controlled this body to lie in the center of the platform, and began to act as a guardian. As for Wuming, he prepared to leave the major source and go on a trip. Collis, I need to find trouble with an imposter. You. But before Wuming could finish, Collis interrupted him. I will follow Master. Collis did not give Wuming a chance and continued. Master's backup body already has the ability to protect the major source, so I don't need to stay with it anymore. Also, Master, you said before that the next time you leave with your main body, you'll take me with you. You can't go back on your word. Wuming smiled helplessly. Was he reaping what he sowed? All right. After all, we haven't worked together for a long time. I'm really not used to not having your help. After all, there were many things that required knowledge, and without Collis, Wuming did not know what to say. After all, ever since Wuming obtained the nameless spellbook, he had stopped learning magic. After having Collis, he had left everything that needed to be recorded to Collis. From the looks of it, Wuming was very lazy. It could be said that if it was not for the nameless spellbook, Wuming would have even recorded the methods of using magic in Collis' database. Collis had not only complained about Wuming's laziness, but Wuming had always brushed her off with the same answer. After all, it's very hard on me. With Collis here, I don't have to work so hard to remember things. Would Collis leave me? Then, these words made Collis feel insulted, and Collis furiously retorted. How could that be? I'll always follow Master, until eternity. And then there was no and then. Then let's go together, my Callis. Yes, my master, my lord. Then there was only a small dragon left in the major source. However, judging from the dangerous glint in its eyes from time to time, this place was not without threats even after Wu Ming left. At the very least, it could be seen from the fact that the black mud outside the root did not have the guts to enter after Wu Ming left. Chapter 563. Outside the M-shaped moon world, an ancient and noble temple that occupied a huge area was located in the void. This was a place located outside of time and space. Its name was the Crown Time Temple. Although it was a temple, it was an open-air venue. If someone stood anywhere in this temple, they only needed to raise their head to see the mysterious scene of the endless universe. On a platform located at the highest point of the innermost part of the temple, a throne comparable to the giant stone throne on the 10th floor of Nazalek was located there. On this throne, there was a man with one hand supporting his chin, and the other on his abdomen. He was taking a nap with his eyes closed. Suddenly the man spoke. Did Floros fail? The man who suddenly spoke seemed to be talking to someone. It was as if he was talking to himself. It doesn't matter. I already guessed the result. Even if you have my power, it's not realistic to deal with him. As he spoke, the man opened his eyes. His scarlet pupils seemed to contain supreme wisdom, but his eyes made people feel cold. I feel it. He's coming. As he spoke, the man looked up at the void. I didn't want to attack you so soon, Origin Dragon. I still want to see Chaldea struggle. But since you're looking for death, don't blame me. As he spoke, the man's face began to turn ferocious. His eyes turned blood red and the corners of his mouth cracked to his ears. Let my temple of time deal with you. On the other side, a huge white dragon was swimming in the void like the universe. Its ruby-like dragon eyes were looking around. It's almost there. Now even without the black mud imprint, I can feel that incomparably hostile power. Although he didn't know why, Wu Ming now knew that he could completely sense the gathering place of those natural enemies. Then, Wu Ming saw the huge aperture that belonged to the M-shaped moon world, and the throne of the temple embedded in the void above the aperture. It's really the periphery of the M-shaped moon world. Wu Ming had an expression of I knew it. Every world was fixed in a certain place in the void. Although the M-shaped moon world had countless parallel worlds, they were all in the same place. If one entered the huge aperture directly, one would immediately enter a parallel world. And if one wanted to enter a specific parallel world or a certain point in time, or even a singularity, one would need to use the space-time tunnel. Wu Ming used the space-time tunnel previously, but Wu Ming didn't find any additional singularities. Then Wu Ming laughed self-deprecatingly. The other party had the power of the origin, so how could he still exist in a singularity? Wu Ming understood that the person he was looking for couldn't be bound by time and space, so he must be in the void of the various worlds that wasn't affected by time and space. Without any hesitation, Wu Ming flew straight to the temple. Just as he entered the temple, Wu Ming felt hostility and realized that something wanted to attack him. An indescribable voice sounded. Then countless tentacles attacked Wu Ming. No, they weren't tentacles. They're actually demon god pillars. Wu Ming squinted his huge red dragon eyes and said. Wu Ming also thought that these were tentacles at first. Although demon god pillars could use tentacles, the tentacles of demon god pillars were spiral-shaped pieces of flesh. However, the tentacles that were attacking them were full of eyes. Taking a closer look, these were clearly demon god pillars. It was just that Wu Ming's body had become a lot bigger, so when he looked at the demon god pillars, they looked like small tentacles. Thinking about it, it's just tentacles. They're useless against my servant body, so how could they be useful against my main body? Wu Ming shook his head. However, could the demon god pillars themselves be enough to deal with Wu Ming's main body? The answer was naturally no. Roar. It was clearly the void, but Wu Ming's roar reverberated in the void. After hearing Wu Ming's roar, the demon god pillars suddenly stopped, but they didn't stop. If one looked carefully, the demon god pillars' movements would become awkward. These low-level creatures were frightened by the pressure of Wu Ming, a high-level creature. Sure enough, You're worthy of being that guy's subordinates. But I didn't expect to subdue you with just a roar. After saying that, Wu Ming didn't stop and continued to fly forward. Immediately, Wu Ming's body emitted light, like a lamp in the darkness. The light instantly covered the demon god pillars. Then faint golden lightning appeared in the light. In terms of attack, this move didn't seem to cause any damage. Instead, the demon god pillars felt a warm feeling. However, Wu Ming's attack was naturally not that simple. The intense light made it impossible to see the demon god pillars covered by the light. Then, the light suddenly erupted with golden lightning. After a few breaths, Wu Ming withdrew the light, and the demon god pillars that were originally covered by the light were nowhere to be seen. The power of the Blade of Salvation isn't something that a mere demon god pillar can block, Wu Ming said indifferently, not taking the demon god pillar's destruction to heart. Then, Wu Ming continued to fly to the platform of the temple, where the throne was located. As for the other demon god pillars, it was unknown whether they were afraid or under someone's orders. In short, they didn't touch Wu Ming anymore. Or rather, they didn't seek their own deaths. Wu Ming flew to the platform that was so wide that it was unseemly, and slowly descended. Dragon of Origin, have you come? Are you ready to accept your death? The man from before was still sitting on his throne with one hand supporting his chin, emitting the aura of a king. His originally ferocious face had now returned to a harmless look. After all, I don't think it's appropriate to leave you behind the scenes. As expected, it's better to get rid of you now. Wu Ming said casually, as if getting rid of the man on the throne was like squashing an ant. You don't have to talk nonsense with me. Dragon of Origin, if you've grown up, I might be afraid. But the current you isn't enough for me to take you seriously. The man's words were filled with arrogance. Although Wu Ming was very displeased, it made Wu Ming smile inside. No matter when, arrogance was a great taboo. Facing the arrogant man, Wu Ming thought he had already won half the battle. Speaking of which, I thought you were at a singularity. I didn't expect you to be in the void outside the world. Wu Ming didn't continue the topic from before, and instead talked about this place. Originally, Wu Ming thought that the other party's base was also a singularity. After all, it was burned on Earth, and the temple that had no foothold could only create a singularity to be independent. As mentioned before, Wu Ming thought so, and entered the space-time tunnel. In the end, he didn't find a singularity. Therefore, Wu Ming directly came to the void. Relying on the Dragon of Origin's natural characteristic of flying freely in the void, Wu Ming came to the vicinity of the M-shaped moon. In the end, Wu Ming really did find it. It could be said that the current Temple of Time was no longer a singularity, but an existence that was truly attached to the void. If it was allowed to develop, it might even become an independent world. That was indeed the case. But one day, the black mud accidentally came to my temple. The man didn't mind Wu Ming changing the topic. Instead, he enthusiastically answered Wu Ming's question. Although Wu Ming already knew, the man suddenly stretched out his hand, and a mass of black substance appeared in his hand. After Wu Ming saw the black mud, he immediately felt uncomfortable. The feeling of a natural enemy surged in his heart. To be honest, if it was me in the past, I might have been affected by these things. However, from what I see now, these black mud are completely increasing my strength. As he spoke, the man stood up. My Temple of Time can be separated from the singularity and become independent of the world. It's all thanks to the power of Origin, Dragon of Origin. The man laughed loudly, and his face was full of devastation. That being said, you haven't fully grasped the power of Origin, have you? King Solomon's faker, or rather, it would be better to call you Gidia. Wu Ming's words made the man frown, and he was stunned. Chapter 564. That's right, I am Gidia, commander of the 72 Demon God Pillars Amalgamation, Demon God King Gidia. Saying that, the man's outer appearance ignited, and immediately, the man's appearance changed completely. He was humanoid, but much taller than an ordinary person, as well as strangely thick forelimbs. A hole appeared in the center of Gidia's chest, and a purple eye-like orb was embedded in the hole, making people shiver. Blood-like vein patterns didn't seem to have been adjusted, but actually covered Gidea's body in an orderly fashion, connecting to the orb in front of Gidea's chest. He couldn't be called human, but had a bald head that looked like a human. On his head grew 2 antlers, but more like tree branches. This was the demon god King Gaia. It was different from Solomon's monster, demon god King Gaia. As expected, you are King Solomon's creation. Wu Ming's draconic eyes narrowed. There's nothing strange about that. Although I'm Solomon's creation, after King Solomon's death, there's nothing strange about me occupying Solomon's body. It could be said that the 72 demon god pillars came from Solomon's magic grimoire Raymond Gayton, also known as Gitia. And after King Solomon's death, the name of the collective that was formed in King Solomon's body was very easy to guess. It was Gaia. The awakened Gitia could be said to be Solomon. After all, Solomon and Gitia were both characters who commanded the 72 demon god pillars, so it wasn't strange for Gitia to occupy the dead Solomon's body. But you really surprised me, Origin Dragon. The demon god King Gitia raised his head, looking at Wu Ming's draconic head. Even the taller Gitia wasn't as large as Wu Ming's original body. Wu Ming was still looking down on Gitia. Then are you surprised that I know you haven't completely grasped your origin power? Or are you surprised that I know your identity? Wu Ming said with incomparable calmness. He was not frightened by Gaia's appearance that was neither human nor ghost at all. After all, he had seen too many dirty things and had gotten used to it. I have both, Gaia smiled and continued. Indeed. Although I've obtained the power of the black origin soil, and used it to move my temple from the singularity to the void, that's all there is to it. In fact, I'm worse than you described. I don't actually control the power of the black origin soil at all. And I'm only relying on the byproduct of controlling the black origin soil. As if he had embarrassed himself, Gitia put the black origin soil back into his body. To be able to guess that I haven't fully grasped the power of origin, it's probably because I've never invaded another world. In response to Gitia's words, Wu Ming nodded. That's right. After all, I'm in the real origin, which is connected to other worlds. I can still do a simple check on your situation, Wu Ming said calmly. As mentioned before, the origin was like a control panel, and Wu Ming was the key to the control panel. Wu Ming, who had gradually grown by absorbing the power of the origin from the origin, gradually unlocked the power of the control panel. For example, he could use the time of the worlds that Wu Ming had visited as well as a simple check on Gitia's situation. However, that was all there was to it. The current Wu Ming didn't have the power to destroy a world with a flick of his finger. Otherwise, Gitia wouldn't have looked down on Wu Ming so much. After all, if Wu Ming had that kind of power, Wu Ming would have eliminated Gitia, who stole the power of origin. If Wu Ming wanted to possess that kind of power, he would have to grow into an adult to obtain that kind of power. Gitia knew a bit about the origin dragon through the origin black mud, so Gitia wasn't worried about Wu Ming doing anything to him. A certain person was entrusted with a treasure comparable to a nation, but because they were too young, that person couldn't open the key to the treasure, and who knew how long it would take for that person to obtain the key. As a result, some people with ulterior motives would definitely play tricks and wouldn't care about that person's thoughts. Gitia was such a person. By the time Wu Ming grew up, Gitia would have achieved his goal. Then, how did you know that I wasn't Solomon? Gitia asked. It could be said that Gitia only cared about, and was surprised by this matter. In my impression, you have never seen Solomon, and your knowledge of him is only from historical records. How can you say my real identity so accurately? Then Gitia shook his head. Don't say that because Raymond Gayton is called Gitia, you guessed that I was the one who occupied King Solomon's body. That would be too degrading. This made Wu Ming stunned for a moment. He was indeed going to say that. Oh, then make a guess, Gitia. Wu Ming looked at Gitia jokingly. Then, after Gitia thought for a few seconds, he gave Wu Ming an answer. I think the biggest possibility is that you met our King Solomon without me knowing. That's the case. Wu Ming smiled. Although Wu Ming's face was smiling, Wu Ming's heart was as if he was facing a great enemy. Gitia's IQ is inexplicably online. Those so-called great villains without IQ seem to be lying. I just saw the real King Solomon, so I knew you were fake. Based on this, I inferred your identity as Gidia. Sure enough. Gidia nodded slightly. Then, I don't know if you can see my other identity, the Dragon of Origin. This time, it was Gidia's turn to let Wuming guess. You don't need to tell me, I will do the same, the first beast. Wuming revealed Gidia's other identity, one of the 7 great human evils, the beast with the principle of mercy, Beast Eye. Wuming had already seen through Gidia's identity through the power of origin, when Gidia appeared. Even if Gidia had the origin black soil on him, Wuming could still see through it as easily as if he saw through Fufu's identity as the 4th beast. Or rather, it was because of the origin black soil on Gidia's body that it made it easier for Wuming to see through Gidia's identity as the 1st beast. It seems that I really underestimated you, Dragon of Origin. Then Gidia raised one of his hands. In front of my great cause, you are really an eyesore. As Gidia spoke, Wuming's muscles tightened. Then you will die here, Dragon of Origin. In an instant, countless black flames shot out from Gidia's hand toward Wuming like a machine gun. Roar! Wuming let out a furious roar, flapped his huge dragon wings, and dodged the black flames in an extremely unscientific manner. That's what I had in mind. You can leave here today, Gidia. Wuming, who had flown into the sky above the lookout, opened his mouth abruptly, and a pale golden flame shot out like a high-pressure water gun, shooting towards Gaia like a tooth for a tooth. Good timing. Gidia yelled and waved his hands. A pure energy barrier appeared before Gidia and blocked Wuming's origin dragon breath. This was the first official confrontation between the young dragon of origin, Wuming, and the deity warden king Gidia, who had obtained the origin black soil. It could be said that whether it was Gidia's black flames or Wuming's origin dragon breath, ordinary servants couldn't resist them at all. If they were ordinary people, they would have been burned to ashes before coming into contact with them, just like ordinary humans approaching the sun. However, for the two of them, who could be said to be superior in terms of status and strength, those were just ordinary attacks. Gidia never thought that his black flames could kill or even injure Wuming, and Wuming was naturally not naive enough to think that his ordinary dragon breath could burn Gidia to death. All of this was just the first confrontation. The real battle had only just begun. Chapter 565. Boom. Like a nuclear explosion, a loud sound reverberated through the entire temple. Thick smoke rose from the depths of the temple. The 72 demon god pillars appeared in various parts of the large temple, all of them staring at the depths of the temple. Swish. A white, holy figure suddenly flew out from the depths of the temple. Even with the countless eyes of the demon god pillars, they were unable to see this figure clearly. They could only hear the sound of something breaking through the air. Then, following closely behind the white figure, a black figure suddenly rushed out. This time, the demon god pillars saw clearly that it was their king, the leader of the 72 demon god pillars, the demon god king Gidia. Then there was no need to guess who the white figure was. It was definitely the dragon of origin that dared to boldly fly into the depths of the temple to look for trouble with their king. In the eyes of the demon god pillars, the dragon of origin was being beaten back by their king, and was even being exterminated by their king. As a result, the demon god pillars began to dance wildly. Their huge tentacles constantly swayed as they rejoiced at the strength of their king. However, Gidia didn't pay attention to the situation of the demon god pillars. Instead, he focused on dealing with Wuming. Even though Gidia was chasing after Wuming, it was actually just Wuming deliberately shifting the battlefield. It wasn't that Gidia couldn't catch up to Wuming, but that he also wanted to shift the battlefield. If the demon god pillars entered the depths of the temple where Gidia was, they would discover that the depths of the temple had already been destroyed beyond recognition. As a formation similar to a battlefield, the Temple of Time could assist Gidia in dealing with the enemy. Moreover, because it was King Solomon's second precious artifact, it could be said to be relatively sturdy. There was basically no need to worry about it being destroyed. It could completely act as a battlefield. However, if the enemy was Wuming, it wouldn't work at all. As mentioned earlier, Gidia, who had obtained the black soil of origin, wasn't afraid of Wuming at all. However, before obtaining the black soil of origin, Gydia was still rather fearful of Wu Ming. The reason why the Dragon of Origin was called the Dragon of Origin was because it was born from the origin. Its body was extremely resistant to magic, and its defense against physical attacks wasn't weak either. This allowed the Origin Dragon to deal with its enemies with brute force. The Temple of Time was dragged out by Gydia through the black origin mud from the void where the singularity was formed. It was not strengthened because Gydia simply used the black origin mud to enhance his own strength. The Time Shrine itself was an A-grade relic. It was a relic of its own. It could be said that even Gilgamesh's parochial sword could destroy this noble artifact. So could it support Wu Ming and Gaia's battle here? Naturally, the answer was no. Moreover, Gydia wouldn't be so arrogant as to divert his attention to protect his noble artifact in the face of an origin dragon. As a result, the Temple of Time couldn't withstand the attacks of Wu Ming and Gydia, who had obtained the origin black soil. This was Gydia's seat. If possible, Gydia did not want to fight there. Wu Ming was also disgusted by the temple's support for Gydia. Therefore, Wu Ming and Gydia willingly left the Temple of Time and went outside. However, the reason Gydia followed behind Wu Ming wasn't because he was acting, but because he really couldn't catch up with Wu Ming. The black origin mud attached to Gydia and increased Gydia's various attributes. Even Gydia's D-grade agility was upgraded to A-grade. However, Wu Ming had 12 clones. As soon as the Phoenix form was activated, the ability to be related to time directly prevented Gydia from catching up with Wu Ming. If one were to look at the data, Wu Ming, who had been in the Origin Dragon for a long time and absorbed a large amount of Origin Dragon's power, all of his attributes were EX, which meant that he was unpredictable. However, Wu Ming didn't think that he could shake off Gydia by relying on his speed alone. So Wu Ming chose to use the Phoenix form. Wu Ming was very strong, but in the face of the black soil, which was his natural enemy, Wu Ming still felt that he was weak. Especially when the enemy was a monster like Gydia, who had obtained the origin black soil. Even if Wu Ming dared to fight Gydia head-on, he was still very cautious. He left the Temple of Time because Wu Ming was cautious, which was why he did so. However, since he had left the enemy's position, he could start again. After leaving the Temple of Time and flying into the void, Wu Ming suddenly turned around and whipped his huge and powerful tail at Gydia. Gydia naturally wasn't afraid. His thick fist mixed with black flames, he punched Wu Ming's tail. Boom! Wu Ming's tail was sent flying high into the air. At the same time, Wu Ming's had launched a platinum dragon breath at Gydia. Gydia, who had been burned, hurriedly retreated and left Wu Ming's attack range. After that, Wu Ming and Gydia stared at each other from a distance, neither moving. The situation became a standoff between the two of them. Wu Ming swayed his tail gently. On his white tail, there were black marks where Gydia had hit it. Those were the marks left behind by Gydia's black soil flame. In addition, there were many black marks on Wu Ming's body, and they were the kind that went deep into his bones. Not only that, but a lot of Wu Ming's dragon scales had also been shattered by Gydia's attack. Although Wu Ming's body was in a sorry state, Gydia wasn't bad either. Gydia's arms had burn marks, and there was a huge wound on his back that extended from his left shoulder to his right abdomen. Gydia's thick arms and thighs were also stained with black burn marks. In addition, one of Gydia's horns was also broken. Whether it was Wu Ming's injuries or Gydia's injuries, they were all caused by the two of them fighting like wild beasts. Gydia knew that the black soil origin restrained Wu Ming, so he would mix in the black soil origin in every attack. The burn marks on Wu Ming's body were all caused by Gydia using the black soil origin as the raw material to release the black flames. When facing the black soil origin, Wu Ming seemed to have no defense. Neither his dragon scales nor his magic power could defend against the black soil origin's attacks, and they were directly penetrated. Often, Gydia's flames would directly burn through Wu Ming's scales and muscles. Every time Wu Ming was attacked, it was as if he had inhaled a fatal poison, and the intense pain was mixed with intense dizziness. However, thanks to this, Wu Ming also took the opportunity to deal a lot of heavy blows to Gydia. The huge wound on Gydia's back had been caused by Wu Ming's blade of salvation, and the broken horns on Gydia's body had also been cut off by Wu Ming's blade of salvation. The burn marks on his body had been caused by Wu Ming's origin breath. Indeed, the origin breath didn't have much effect on Gidia, but many little drops made an ocean. Wu Ming had successfully caused a lot of damage to Gidia by repeatedly spitting out flames and condensing them into lines of fire. However, it was thanks to the black soil origin that he was able to cause double the damage to Gidia. After all, Wu Ming and the black soil origin were mutually reinforcing and counteracting. From the injuries of the two, it could be seen how much Gidia regretted his decision. This was also the reason why Gidia chose to leave the position that was advantageous to him. Gidia guessed that if they continued fighting like this, the Temple of Time would probably be directly torn apart. I didn't expect that. I still underestimated you, Dragon of Origin. You actually have so many tricks up your sleeve, Gidia said to Wu Ming calmly. Wu Ming's own abilities weren't enough to be fatal to Gidia. What was fatal to Gidia were Wu Ming's divine blade of salvation and his 12 incarnations. Whether it was Wu Ming's own abilities or the origin breath, Gidia wasn't afraid of them at all. Indeed, they wouldn't have any effect on Gidia. However, if it was the divine blade of salvation that was originally very strong and had been evolved by the origin after being obtained by Wu Ming, as well as the 12 incarnations that came from the fusion of the two gods' 12 attributes, Gidia would have to be more vigilant. Why do you think I dared to cause trouble for you? Even if you've obtained the black soil origin, you're too arrogant, Gidia. With that, Wu Ming directly roared, and a fireball appeared from Wu Ming's mouth. It was Wu Ming's sun incarnation. Immediately afterward, the fireball became so huge that it was large enough to cover Gidia. Then Wu Ming suddenly pushed the fireball at Gidia at an extremely fast speed. Don't think that you can defeat me just because you have some tricks, Dragon of Origin. After saying that, Gidia spread open his arms, and in an instant, a large light wheel appeared behind him. The large light wheel gathered power in an instant, and then a purple-black beam of light blasted at Wu Ming. Boom! The battle was still ongoing. Chapter 566. Inside the Root of Origin, Wu Ming's backup machine, which was lying on the platform and taking a nap, suddenly woke up. Wu Ming shifted his consciousness to the backup machine. Gidia actually attracted the other black origin mud that was wandering in the void, and then self-destructed. Wu Ming recalled what had happened with a gloomy expression. After Wu Ming and Gidia left the Time God's temple, they first used the sun incarnation to clash with Gidia's third relic, causing a violent explosion. If the demon god pillars had not combined their powers to form a defense, they and the Time God's temple would have been destroyed by Wu Ming and Gidia's attacks. The Time God's temple was saved, although it was still in a shattered state. The 72 demon god pillars were also almost destroyed. Although they had been revived, they were still heavily injured. Then, Wu Ming directly returned to his human form, and used the power of the 12 incarnations and the divine blade of salvation to fight Gidia to a standstill. However, overall, Wu Ming had the upper hand. However, Gidia was someone who had lived for thousands of years. The black origin mud that he possessed could not hurt Wu Ming, so he used the black origin mud that was scattered in the void to trap Wu Ming. Wu Ming was almost trapped in the black origin mud that Gidia had gathered. The black origin mud was a substance without a consciousness. It was also because of this that Wu Ming was not afraid of the black origin mud. Wu Ming was most afraid of people using the black origin mud against him. The black origin mud was like a gun. Wu Ming was an ordinary person, and an ordinary person would not be afraid of an inanimate object. However, if someone picked up a gun and fired at Wu Ming's life would be in danger. The 12 incarnations and the divine blade of salvation were Wu Ming's guns. With a gun, Wu Ming could fight back against the person who used a gun against him. That's right, because Wu Ming and the black origin mud countered each other. They were basically two berserkers. However, there was a limit to how well they countered each other. Gidia had gathered almost all the black origin mud in the void. Wu Ming in his human form was like a lone boat in the sea. It could be said that if it were not for the 12 incarnations and the divine blade of salvation, Wu Ming would have died in the black origin mud tide. If Silent Wonder was subdued by the black origin soil, Gaia would not mind killing him. From Wu Ming's current situation, it could be seen that Wu Ming's outcome was still not good. When Gaia saw that Wu Ming was about to escape from the Origin Black Soil's encirclement, he made a bold decision. He directly let the Black Origin Mud self-destruct. For example, in a sealed secret room, an ordinary person was holding a pesticide and killing insects. However, because he really couldn't touch the insects, he directly tore apart the pesticide sprayer violently and sprayed the pesticide everywhere in the secret room. In this way, the insects were finished. But it should be known that pesticides were also harmful to the human body. Kill 1,000 enemies, but lose 800 of your own. Wu Ming's body disappeared in the explosion of the Black Origin Mud, and Gidia was also injured by the self-destruction of the Black Origin Mud. Wu Ming could guess what Gidia was thinking. The current Wu Ming was quite difficult to deal with. After letting him go, there was no guarantee that Wu Ming would not become stronger again. It could only be said that Gidia was worthy of his reputation. He didn't even think about it. Or it could be said that he directly detonated the Black Origin Mud after careful consideration. As a result, Wu Ming's body disappeared, Gidia was injured, and the Black Origin Mud was almost completely destroyed. Wu Ming, who had temporarily transferred his consciousness, knew that his body didn't die, but was injured more severely than Gidia, and had been blasted to some unknown world. For example, could you imagine someone detonating the earth to kill an ordinary person? It could be said that if Wu Ming hadn't been soaking in the Black Origin for a long time to absorb its power to evolve, he would probably have died. No, it should be said that even Wu Ming would have died in such a situation when he was fighting Artesius. It seems that the Black Origin is really a hotbed for me. Wu Ming was a little regretful. He should have soaked in the Black Origin for a while before looking for Gidia. At the very least, he wouldn't have been forced to transfer his consciousness because of the Black Origin Mud's explosion. Wu Ming had transferred his consciousness because the Black Origin Mud's self-destruction didn't just target his body, but also his mind. Physical damage could be recovered, but if his mind collapsed, it would basically be over. Fortunately, Gidia helped me solve part of the problem. Gidia had gathered almost all of the Black Origin Mud in the void of various worlds and detonated them. It could be said that Wu Ming no longer had to worry about the Black Origin Mud in the void. However, the Black Origin Mud didn't only exist in the void. According to Wu Ming's experience, Wu Ming already knew that a lot of Black Origin Mud had entered various worlds. Moreover, there was no guarantee that Gidia wouldn't mass-produce the Black Origin Mud himself. Wu Ming guessed that the reason the Black Origin Mud was endless was because of its asexual reproduction ability. Wu Ming didn't believe that such a large amount of Black Origin Mud really came from the Black Origin. The most important evidence was the image Wu Ming saw when he came into contact with the Black Origin Mud mark. The amount of Black Origin Mud that left the Black Origin Mud from the Black Origin wasn't as much as what Gidia had detonated. The Black Origin Mud only appeared after Wu Ming was sent away from the Black Origin. And Wu Ming knew his own situation. He didn't stay in the Black Origin world for long before he was sent to another world to grow. What a headache! Wu Ming reached out his dragon claw and rubbed his head. This was great. Kalas and Enkidu were both on Wu Ming's main body, and the two of them disappeared with Wu Ming's main body. However, no matter what, Gidia didn't have the ability to play any tricks now. The self-destruction of the Black Origin Mud was enough for him to deal with. I have to find my main body as soon as possible. It's hard to calculate the time. After all, the flow of time in the world that Wu Ming's main body entered might be different from the Black Origin world. The self-destruction of the Black Origin Mud just now had temporarily disrupted Wu Ming's control of the Black Origin world. It would take some time before Wu Ming could find out where his main body was through the Black Origin world. And Wu Ming's current main body couldn't leave the Black Origin world. Who knew if there were any fish that slipped through the net in the void? If the Black Origin Mud invaded, Wu Ming would have nowhere to cry. Sigh, looks like I can only wait. Wu Ming lay down on the platform and started to rest. Although Wu Ming had shifted his consciousness in time, Wu Ming's consciousness was still greatly affected. Now Wu Ming felt like his head had been run over by a truck. It's hard to imagine what would happen to me if I was completely injured by the self-destruction of the Black Origin Mud. If he was slightly affected, It would be like being run over by a truck. If he was completely injured, he would probably have a mental breakdown. At this moment, a letter suddenly fell from the Black Origin world to Wuming's head. A letter? This gave Wuming a fright. Wuming didn't have any malicious intent in this letter. In the Black Origin world, Wuming was half invincible. He could still detect the danger of a letter. In other words, this was a harmless letter. Then Wuming used his telekinesis to pick up the letter that fell on his head. There was nothing else on the snow-white envelope except for the red ink on the back, which was used to ensure that the letter was sealed. It looked like a simple and plain letter that couldn't be any more simple. However, Wuming narrowed his eyes and started to think about the problem. The Black Origin world wasn't a place that anyone could enter. Now that Wuming was guarding the Black Origin world, not just anyone could enter, unless Wuming agreed to it. Wuming looked at the letter and suddenly thought of a possibility. But before opening the letter, Wuming gathered his power and created a servant's spiritual base. This was in preparation for him to help Gadatsi at the next singularity. Then Wuming opened the letter. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.